So hello and welcome everyone. I'm Carolyn Wilson and work as a medical officer at the MSSO and will be your instructor today. And I'm supported by my colleague Leander. So together we will take you through this webinar, which will last for about 2 hours. Leander mentioned already that we would like to make this webinar interactive. So please submit your questions or send us your comments through the question panel. And I will allow as much time as possible for questions both during the course and also at the end of this presentation. We will start with 2 standard slides with some relevant information about MedDRA in this training material. ICH adopted the development of MedDRA in the mid-1990s and finally became the owner of the terminology. ICH then, on contract, appointed the MSSO to take care of the maintenance and further development of the terminology based on user feedback, to provide and organize corresponding training like the one that we have today, and to administer the MedDRA licenses. And all activities of the MSSO are overseen by the ICH MedDRA Steering Committee, with members of the regulatory bodies and pharmaceutical industry associations in Europe, in the US and Japan, member from Health Canada, the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency MHRA in UK, and the WHO as an observer. And since May 25 this year, new members have joined the group, namely the Chinese National Medical Products Administration, or short NMPA, the Saudi Food and Drug Authority, or SFDA, and a member of the IFPMA, or International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers and Associations, as an observer. ICH is not only the owner of MedDRA itself, but also owns this training material. It is protected worldwide. You may use the slides, with the exception of the MedDRA and ICH logos, but will have to clearly indicate that ICH owns the copyright. Also, any adaptations of the slides have to be clearly labeled. The second bullet point refers to warranty and liability issues you should be aware of. And the third bullet point here is not relevant for today because we will not be using any third-party slides. Let me provide you with an overview on what we will cover today. We will first talk about the MedDRA background and its governance. We will then address its scope, structure, and characteristics, and then look into how MedDRA is maintained and look at some helpful tools provided by the MSSO that you can use as a MedDRA subscriber for free. These are the MedDRA browsers that can be used to browse the terminology and look for appropriate terms for coding purposes, but also the MVAT tool that can be used to compare different versions of MedDRA. I will also demonstrate some features of the browser to provide you with some information about its functionalities, not only for coding purposes, but also for data analysis and retrieval purposes. Afterwards, we will discuss MedDRA coding in general, and 2 important documents you should make yourself familiar with, the so-called Points to Consider, or PTC documents. And at the end of the presentation, we will talk about the standardized MedDRA queries, or SMQs, that were developed to assist in data retrieval, presentation, and analysis of MedDRA-coded data. And we will conclude with a question and answer session, as mentioned at the beginning of the session. But we will address your questions throughout the session as well. The next 2 slides explain about the polling. Leander has mentioned already that we will be using quiz questions during the webinar. If you would like to join the quizzes and participate in the examples today, there are 2 ways to do so. The easiest way is to scan this QR code with your smartphone or tablet. Or you may enter the indicated web address into the URL bar at the top of your internet browser in your computer, tablet, or cell phone. It is paulf.com. It will then take you to a log on screen and you'll be asked for a username. The poll is completely anonymous, so you don't need to enter your name, but please enter my credentials as username, that is Carol N. Wills 584 with no spaces. Nothing more to be entered, just click join then. And Leanna has put these credentials in the chat as well. Please don't get under time pressure because you will be able to see these credentials on each slide that relates to the quizzes. Now let's see whether our quiz works. Oh, it seems so. I see the Philippines, I see Turkey, Merhaba, I see Spain, buenos días, England, good morning, Finnish, I don't speak Finnish, hello, hello Finland, Balkan countries, I see Russia, South Africa. What is it? South of, let me see, geography. What is it? Is it Mali or I think it's, oh, disappeared. I thought it's somebody from Niger. I only see South Africa. India is there. So welcome everyone. I think Georgia. Welcome everyone. Nice to meet you all in cyberspace here. Let us now start with the first topic on our agenda, the MedDRA background and governance. What is MedDRA? MedDRA stands for Medical Dictionary for Regulatory Activities. But actually it is not a dictionary with an alphabetical list of medical terms and their definition. It is rather a terminology that includes and organizes a wide range of medical terms. MedDRA structures these terms not in alphabetical order, but based on a defined system. We will talk about this later. It is important to realize that MedDRA does not contain definitions, medical definitions. So when confronted with medical terms you are not familiar with and that need to be coded, you will have to use some reliable medical references like the Dorland's dictionary, medical textbooks, or online references like the Merck manual, for instance, that is available for free also in different languages on the internet. Let us start with one general question. What do you think are the benefits of using MedDRA? Why was MedDRA introduced at all? Does it have any benefits at all? What do you think? What are the benefits? Standardization, yes. To harmonize, harmonization, standardization of medical terminology in pharma industry, exactly, common language, global standardization, exactly. Streamline information as well, yes. Harmonization. Fully right. Using standardized term, standardized terminology, so that we all speak one language when exchanging safety information of medicinal products. Perfect. Thank you for joining. You got it right. So MedDRA is about standardization, harmonization. With the standardization achieved with MedDRA, we are now speaking the same language when talking about safety data from pre-marketing and clinical development to post-marketing and pharmacovigilance. And MedDRA has replaced legacy terminologies like CoSTART that was mainly used in clinical studies or HUART that was mainly used in post-marketing. It is not only used by the biopharmaceutical industry, but of course also by the regulatory authorities around the globe. The terminology is used for entering and coding clinical data, but it also has features that support data retrieval and analysis as well as presentation of clinical safety data. We will not be able to go into very much detail about operational coding and data retrieval today, so I will just provide you an overview. But you have the option to attend additional webinars that we offer. 2 are designed for coders, and they are called Coding Basics and Advanced MedDRA Coding. And then there are additional webinars for more advanced coders, one in workshop format called Let's Code Together, and another webinar that focuses on the principles for coding medication errors and other product use issues. Two other webinars are designed for MedDRA users who work in the data retrieval and analysis area, and they are called Data Analysis and Query Building with MedDRA, and another one that addresses the standardized MedDRA queries or SMQs, just to let you know. The explanation of MedDRA's purpose holds the keywords for our session today: standardization of exchange of clinical information. MedDRA allows us to use a common language when exchanging clinical information. It is used for product evaluation, for monitoring product safety, for communication of clinical specifics, and activities related to product oversight. Standardization and harmonization that has been achieved with MedDRA is further enhanced by other initiatives like the implementation of ICH standards for electronic reporting and data exchange like E2B. And when it comes to coding and data retrieval and analysis for medicinal products, MedDRA supports not only pharmaceuticals or drugs, but also biologics, vaccines, and drug-device combination products, and also devices. From a governance point of view, the ICH MedDRA Steering Committee that is appointed by the ICH Assembly provides oversight of MedDRA-related activities, including the activities of the MedDRA Maintenance and Support Services Organization, or MSSO. The next slide further explains the relationship of the ICH Steering Committee and the MSSO. ICH owns MedDRA, and the ICH Steering Committee contracts with the MSSO to maintain the terminology. It has oversight on all operations of the MSSO by meeting regularly with the MSSO management, setting subscription rates, and approving future development plans and MSSO services. Membership does not only include ICH regulatory authorities, but also industry associations. The MSSO then provides international support to MedDRA users by administration of the licensees, training offers like the one that we have today, user group meetings, etc. But it also maintains and further develops the terminology based on user feedback. Its partner organization is the Japanese Maintenance Organization, or JMO, that takes care of the Japanese language MedDRA and of the support of the Japanese MedDRA users. And as mentioned before, all these MSSO activities are overseen by the MedDRA Steering Committee. Here it is further specified where and in which areas MedDRA is used. It is used throughout the whole product development process, from phase 1 to phase 3, for new drug applications, and after approval in phase 4 studies and pharmacovigilance activities. Please note that preclinical data, preclinical testing, are not within the scope of MedDRA. MedDRA is not only used in industry databases, but in regulatory databases as well. It is used in a number of documents, like the ICSRs and safety summary reports, in clinical study reports, investigators' brochures, for compiling company core safety information, marketing applications, publications, when summarizing safety information, in prescribing information, and in some countries like in the US, also for advertising purposes like in TV commercials. Are there any questions so far Leander, did we receive questions?
Currently no questions, thank you, Carol Ann.
Thank you. Let's move on then and talk about MedDRA scope, structure, and characteristics. This is a key slide that shows what is in the scope of MedDRA or what type of medical terms is covered by MedDRA. In the blue circle, you will find all terms and conditions that are within MedDRA scope. It incorporates terms for medical conditions like diagnosis and clinical signs and symptoms, pharmacogenetic terms, terms for indications for use, investigational tests names and also results, medical and surgical procedures, terms for the medical, social, and family history of patients, toxicologic issues, as well as product quality issues and device-related issues. Last but not least, the scope of MedDRA also includes the standardized MedDRA queries that are used for data retrieval purposes, and in addition, terms for medication errors and product use issues were added in the last few years based on requests from regulators. On the other hand, MedDRA excludes terms, for instance those that relate to frequencies, unless such information is medically relevant for instance, when it comes to frequent micturition or frequent bowel movements. The same holds true for indicators of severity. You will only find a few of them on preferred term level, where clear medical definitions exist for the characterization of the condition, like in the case of the preferred term severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS, for instance. You will not find any numerical values for investigational results, but qualifiers like normal, abnormal, increased, decreased, positive, negative. Also, patient demographic terms relating to race, gender, age, etc. are excluded, with the exception of terms where this information is relevant based on medical considerations. Like for instance, when it comes to male or female infertility, male or female breast cancer, senile dementia, infantile acne, or neonatal jaundice, for instance. So here you would find specific terms that include demographic information, but you won't find them for each and every medical condition. MedDRA also is not a drug dictionary, nor is it a medical equipment, device, or diagnostic product dictionary. So you won't find any brand names in the terminology, but there are several terms that include generic drug names, like for instance the PT thalidomide embryopathy. And you won't find brand names of devices, but terms for specific device types like catheters, joint prostheses, cardiac pacemakers, etc. And finally, MedDRA does not contain any terms that refer to clinical trial study design like double-blind, placebo-controlled, etc. So important to remember what is in the scope of MedDRA and what is not in scope of MedDRA. We now come to the structure of MedDRA and will look into how MedDRA is organized. Remember, I told you that it's a terminology, not a dictionary where the terms are grouped in alphabetical order. So it is organized in a defined way. MedDRA has a systematic 5-level hierarchical structure, starting with the system organ class, or SOC, on the top, and the high-level group terms, or HLGTs, underneath, that then group the high-level terms, or HLTs. Under the HLTs, you will find the preferred terms, or PTs. They represent the medical concept level, what we call it. The PT level is used for data retrieval, presentation, and analysis purposes. And the PTs then group the lowest level terms, or LLTs, that are used for data entry and operational coding. You can see that starting from the top, MedDRA gets more and more granular and specific, that is from 27 SOCs to nearly 90,000 LLTs. For coding purposes, you would browse MedDRA to find the most specific and accurate LLT for the reported patient information among these more than nearly 90,000 LLTs. Please note that only British English is used at the PT level and above. It is only on the LLT level where you would find terms in American English as well. So if you would look for a specific PT and use American English for your search in the browser, you may run into problems and not find suitable results. American English only on LLT level. Here we have the 27 system organ classes. Some SOCs group terms based on their manifestation sites, like blood and lymphatic system disorders, cardiac disorders, musculoskeletal, renal, and urinary disorders, vascular disorders, for instance. Other SOCs group terms based on the etiology of the respective conditions, like, for instance, SOC congenital, SOC immune system disorders, SOC infections and infestations, SOC injury, poisoning, and procedural complications, SOC neoplasms, for instance. So a number of them group terms based on the etiology. SOC product issues groups terms that relate to product quality issues. SOC social circumstances contains terms that describe the social context of patients, like lifestyle issues, family issues, etc. Please note that terms from this system organ class, social circumstances, should normally not be used for coding adverse events, rather medical history of patients. And the system organ classes, surgical and medical procedures, and investigations group terms based on their purpose. So you will need good knowledge about the system organ classes and their content in order to get a better feel on where to search in MedDRA, in the MedDRA hierarchy, to find a specific medical concept or term. Let's look at an example for the MedDRA hierarchy, in this instance in SOC cardiac disorders. Under this SOC, you'll find 10 HLGTs representing the main types of cardiac disorders. And here we have selected HLGT cardiac arrhythmias. Under this HLGT, there are several HLTs grouping PTs for the different types of arrhythmias, like supraventricular arrhythmias, ventricular arrhythmias, etc. The HLT shown on this slide is HLT rate and rhythm disorders, NEC. NEC standing for not elsewhere classified. NEC groupings are only found on HLGT or HLT level. They represent like miscellaneous groupings of terms that do not fit into any other HLT or HLGT. One of the PTs under this HLT, rate and rhythm disorders, NEC, is the PT arrhythmia, that groups a number of LLTs that are not all shown on this slide, just to make you aware. LLTs represent synonyms, quasi-synonyms, lexical variants of the PT term, and also colloquial, patient-friendly terms. The LLT level is the data entry level, and the granularity on the LLT level provides guidance to medical coders, and by providing this guidance, it facilitates accurate and consistent coding. And please note that each LLT is only linked to one PT. So each LLT is only linked to one PT. Hierarchy starts, we come to this later on. So it's important to know that here this is only linked to one PT, each LLT. Now let's look at the LLTs under this PT arrhythmia. And again, not all of them are shown on the slide. Arrhythmia NOS stands for arrhythmia not otherwise specified. It doesn't make a lot of difference whether you select arrhythmia NOS or LLT arrhythmia when coding, but it is really good practice only using these NOS terms when it is explicitly reported that a given condition could not be further specified. So if just arrhythmia is reported without any further information, it would be good practice to just select LLT arrhythmia and not to assume that it is an NOS. LLT dysrhythmias represents a synonym for arrhythmia. And some of the LLTs are labeled non-current, like the LLT other specified cardiac dysrhythmias on this slide here. It is marked in red, and this is also how the non-current terms are highlighted in the MedDRA browser. Non-current terms are only found on the LLT level. LLTs are set non-current when identified as ambiguous, truncated, misspelled, or when not following MedDRA rules in the case of combination terms. They are flagged and should not be used for ongoing coding. They are not removed from the terminology in order to preserve the information from legacy cases. So if you have logged a clinical database in a previous MedDRA version, you would still be able to find these terms in the latest version, although they may have been made non-current and could map them to another suitable LLT. An example for a non-current LLT is the CoStar term nausea and vomiting, representing a combination term that is represented by two separate MedDRA PTs. It has the non-current status and is grouped under PT vomiting. Another example would be the ambiguous term angina, a term that is most frequently used to describe angina pectoris, but that may also, of course, relate to angina tonsillaris. Each MedDRA term is assigned an 8-digit numeric code. The codes are assigned sequentially and are not at all expressive, meaning that you cannot predict or deduct where a specific MedDRA term would be located in the MedDRA hierarchy based on its numerical code. Codes are used in databases and are relevant for electronic submissions, but they are also very helpful when it comes to translations. MedDRA is a multi-language terminology and is currently available in 24 languages, which are highlighted in blue here. Many of the newer European translations are to support the electronic prescribing information initiative of the European Medicines Agency. We are working on additional translations, as you can see on this image, and the MSSO will provide estimated release dates for these languages as they become available. The same concepts have the same code in all MedDRA translations. In the center, you can see the numerical code for the medical concept headache and its respective translations. This feature is very useful for communication in all languages and also for the translation of safety information, for instance, for local labeling purposes. So we talked about the hierarchy of MedDRA. Another feature of MedDRA, of the MedDRA structure, is its multi-axiality, allowing for representation of PTs in multiple SOCs based on medical considerations. So what is meant by that? Let's take the example of the preferred term dyspnea, representing the medical concept shortness of breath. If I would ask you in what SOC you would expect this PT to be in, some of you may say in SOC respiratory, based on the manifestation side. But others may say in SOC cardiac disorders, because dyspnea is an important symptom of cardiac disease. And both of you are right, or would be right, and you will find PT dyspnea under both system organ classes, one based on the manifestation side, but also based on the etiology of the condition. So this allows for data presentation and analysis based on different medical considerations, depending on your area of interest and also product-specific considerations. In order to achieve standardization for cumulative data output for MedDRA-coded data, all PTs with multiple SOC linkages need to have a default or primary SOC assignment. So this primary SOC assignment will determine which SOC represents the multi-axial PT during cumulative data output and presentation for integrated safety summaries, periodic safety reporting, etc. The primary SOC is defined by MedDRA. This feature prevents double counting of events as a respiratory or cardiac condition in our previous example of PT dyspnea. And the standardization that is achieved by primary SOC presentation of data is required by regulators as well and has to be followed. So deliberate changes, even if a database allows for it, will not be accepted. Usually it is hard-coded in the coding systems, but if you have a system that allows you to choose, you must always select the primary SOC that is defined, hardwired by MedDRA. Important to remember. Let's look at the rules that are applied for the primary SOC assignment within MedDRA. If the respective PT has only one SOC linkage, obviously this SOC is automatically its primary SOC. PTs for diseases in clinical signs and symptoms usually have their prime manifestation site as primary SOC. But there are three exceptions. Firstly, congenital terms and hereditary conditions always have the SOC congenital as primary SOC. Secondly, neoplasm terms always have SOC neoplasms as primary SOC, with the exception of cysts and polyps, which have their prime manifestation site as primary SOC. And thirdly, infection and infestation terms always have SOC infections as primary SOC. So again, most PTs are grouped based on their manifestation site, with the exception of these three system organ classes: congenital, neoplasms, and infections. Let's look at an example for multi-axiality using PT obesity cardiomyopathy. It has SOC cardiac disorders as primary SOC based on its manifestation site, and a secondary linkage to SOC metabolism and nutrition disorders to represent the etiology of the condition, because it's an obesity cardiomyopathy. Please note that a PT can have any number of secondary linkages, not just one or two. Especially in SOC congenital, there are PTs that represent very complex congenital anomalies affecting many body sites. They may have up to 7 secondary SOC linkages, like for example the PT charge syndrome. All these additional linkages are called secondary. They are all equal, so there is no ranking among them. And by the way, more than 40% of all PTs in MedDRA are multi-axial. Here another example. We are looking at the PT influenza. It has SOC infections and infestations as primary SOC and a secondary linkage to the site of manifestation that is SOC respiratory. This is one of the exception SOCs I have shown before. Remember, these are SOC congenital, SOC neoplasms, and SOC infections. In general, however, the PTs are assigned a primary SOC based on the site of manifestation. Only exceptions, these three SOCs. Now, some quiz questions for you. Which of these concepts can be coded using MedDRA? Remember what I've shown you before, the scope of MedDRA, what is in the scope of MedDRA, what is out of scope of MedDRA. Grade 4 adverse drug reaction, expired product administered, breast sounds normal, breast cancer female, X-ray machine, Hispanic, Voltaren, induced gastritis, wheelchair user, device contamination prior to use. We seem to be in agreement with the breast cancer female. So the X-ray machine is just a diagnostic machine. Has no, remember what is out of scope of MedDRA, diagnostic tools, for instance. This is not an investigational result. It doesn't tell anything about the condition in the patient. Different wheelchair user, social circumstances. Hispanic is just demographic information. Remember, I told you that demographic information is only used when it's medically relevant. Breast sounds normal, yes, they are normal, abnormal, decreased, increased terms in MedDRA when it comes to investigational results. Expired product administered, yes, medication error in this instance. Grade 4 adverse drug reaction. So this is a severity indicator. It's not included in MedDRA severity indicators. Only a few exceptions when it's really part of a medical concept. So this would not, you wouldn't find any grade 4 or grade 3 terms in MedDRA, nor the X-ray machine, nor the Hispanic. But all the others are, and here the Voltaren is of course a brand name, so you won't find a brand name in MedDRA as well. So 3 of them you won't find, 4 of them, grade 4, X-ray machine, Hispanic, Voltaren, related gastritis. These are not to be found in MedDRA, but all the others, yes. Remember always the scope of MedDRA, what is in the scope and what is out of scope of MedDRA. Next one, each LLT is linked to only one PT. Is this true or is it false? I see you voting. Let's see what you're going for. We have split of opinion here. Remember the hierarchy and multi-axiality. Where does multi-axiality start? Remember the image that I've shown you with the obesity, cardiomyopathy. Where did the multi-axiality start? Let me close the poll. Each LLT is only linked to one PT. It's correct. So most of you are on the right track here. Remember, multi-axiality starts on PT level. LLTs are only grouped under one PT. Important to remember. And what about this one? Each PT is linked to only one HLT. True or false? Let's see what you're going for. Yes, that's false, of course. Multi-axiality starts at PT level. I've told you that more than 40% of the PTs in MedDRA are multi-axial. So it starts on PT level. It can also start at HLT or even HLGT level, but never on LLT level. Important to remember. Well done. Thank you for joining. Next one. Which are non-current MedDRA LLTs? And here more than one answer may be correct. Remember what I've shown you before about truncated, misspelled, ambiguous terms that are set non-current in MedDRA. So what about MI or combination terms? Insomnia with sleep apnea, bloody drainage, abdomen bloating. You're voting for all of them, and that's fully correct. So MI could stand for myocardial infarction, mesenteric ischemia, mitral insufficiency, even mental illness, or medical investigation. So it's an ambiguous abbreviation, and that's why it's non-current in MedDRA. Insomnia with sleep apnea represents a combination term that is represented by two separate PTs in MedDRA. Again, non-current. Bloody drainage. This could relate to a surgical procedural term referring to the systematic withdrawal of fluids, or a non-surgical term referring to a discharge and secretion, so excretion of blood from the body. So again, an ambiguous term, and that's why it's non-current in MedDRA. And abdomen bloating is a truncated term, does not fit the MedDRA naming conventions. So again, this one is non-current. And now, in which SOC would you expect to find PT cerebrovascular accident? So based on the manifestation side and the etiology. So which part of the body is affected when it comes to cerebrovascular accident. Vascular disorders, nervous system disorders. So these seem to be the favorite solutions, and that's fully correct. So the primary SOC would be nervous system disorders representing the manifestation side, and the secondary linkage to SOC vascular representing the etiology. Of course, it could cerebrovascular accident could be due to cardiac disorders or blood disease or also congenital, but this is not it's not as specific in MedDRA. So the vascular system is the one affected by thrombosis, embolism, or by a rupture leading to the cerebrovascular accident. So nervous system would be the primary SOC, vascular disorders would be the secondary linkage, because that's the etiology of the cerebrovascular accident, a vascular condition. Could be embolism, thrombosis, hemorrhage, whatsoever. Next one. In which system organ classes would you expect to find PT colon cancer? Again, thinking about the etiology and the manifestation side. Neoplasms, correct. And neoplasms would be the primary SOC because this is one of the exception SOCs. And the manifestation side is the gastrointestinal disorders. So etiology, neoplasms, manifestation side, gastrointestinal disorders. Perfect. Well done. Thank you. Any questions, additional questions, Leander, so far?
Currently no questions, thank you, Carol-Ann.
Thank you. So just to let you know, this training will not be able, of course, to provide you with all details of MedDRA definitions and specifics. So to even better understand MedDRA, please refer to the MedDRA introductory guide. This document is available in many of the MedDRA languages and is updated with each MedDRA version. It describes specific MedDRA rules and conventions, as well as MedDRA naming conventions that are relevant to better understand MedDRA classifications. For example, per convention, The abdominal wall is considered a gastrointestinal structure. That's why you would find it in this system organ class. And the pharynx and diaphragm are considered respiratory structures. So I would highly recommend to study this document thoroughly, at least the introductory part, and especially for beginners or less experienced MedDRA users, it is really helpful, and I'm sure that you will find it useful. So I would shortly like to show you where to find it. Here we are. And if we click on how to use support documentation on the MedDRA website, here is the latest version, MedDRA version 28.0. And if I open this little arrow here, here's the introductory guide for MedDRA version 28.0. If I click on it, you will see here you have the naming conventions, some rules on conventions, and then starting with page number 24, there's separate chapters for each system organ class. But I think that the first 4 chapters are really important to read in order to better understand MedDRA, the naming conventions, the structure. You see that here the different levels in the hierarchy is further explained, and word order, MedDRA codes, body site considerations in MedDRA. If I click on it, here you see the abdominal wall in general. The abdominal wall is classified in MedDRA as gastrointestinal structure. The chest wall is classified as musculoskeletal structure. The eyelid is classified as the structure of the eye. And this, of course, then defines where you would find related terms in MedDRA. So it's really helpful to read this if you are not too familiar with MedDRA already. So let me switch back. Here we are. Oops. No, that was wrong. Here we are. So next, we will now talk about the maintenance of the terminology. MedDRA has to be maintained in order to keep up to date with medical science and also to meet the expectations of users in regulatory agencies, pharmaceutical industry, etc. The maintenance of MedDRA is mainly triggered by the MedDRA users, who can send up to 100 change requests per month to the MSSO for consideration, so quite a number. For example, you may think that a primary SOC assignment of a PT is not appropriate, but of course considering the MedDRA rules that are defined in the MedDRA introductory guide. As mentioned before, you should not change the primary SOC assignment in your database if you can do so, but you have the option to submit a respective change request to the MSSO for consideration. You will get a response from the MSSO within 7 to 10 working days when submitting proposals for simple changes affecting the LLT and PT level only. Complex changes affecting higher levels of the hierarchy will be posted mid-year for discussion in the user community, and based on the user feedback, a final decision will be taken. There are 2 releases of MedDRA per year. One that includes complex changes above the PT level called complex or major version release, always on the 1st of March. It's the 0.0 release. And another one, a simple release, always on the 1st of December of each year, the 0.1 release. That will only affect the LLT and PT level. So the latest release was version 28.0 and was a complex release, so affecting also levels above the PT level. For the submission of change requests, the MSSO has developed a web-based tool called WebCR. The slide provides you with the URL here. but you will also find the link within the support section of the MedDRA website on the change request information page, together with a detailed user guide how to use it. The tool has a user-friendly interface that is easy to work with. And please note that change requests must be submitted in English language. You have the option to submit change requests for MedDRA terms and SMQs, and also change requests for the translations of MedDRA. When submitting a single change request or a batch of change requests, you will get an immediate confirmation from the MSSO of the receipt. The tool allows users to check the change request history back to version 5.1. And this is helpful to check this history before submitting your or considering your own change request. Other users may have submitted the same request before. It may have been accepted already. So it would be a supplemental term that will only be released with the next MedDRA version. So if so, you would not have to submit the request again and save time. But it may also have been rejected, and you will be able to review the rationale for the rejection and can then decide whether a resubmission would make sense or not. Here, a screenshot of the new WebCR platform landing page. In order to access the tool, you will need your user ID and your password, and the tool guides users to enter all required information. It's really easy to use. The slide shows an example of the user interface for the submission of a request for a new LLT. As you can see, the proposal for the PT linkage here is optional, but a justification for this change request is always needed, best with supporting documentation provided either as an attachment or by providing links. In addition to the single change requests, there may be more systematic issues affecting multiple LLTs and or preferred terms that you would like to address with the MSSO. For example, MedDRA terms that represent similar conditions, like inflammation for instance, at different body sites may have been handled inconsistently over time. The MSSO does proactive change requests internally when needed, but such changes may also be suggested by the MedDRA users. They are to be sent to the MSSO help desk email address with the justification. As an example, you can see a proactive request that was actually provided by myself when I was still working in pharmaceutical industry, asking for the review of the placement of bruising and contusion terms. Reason was that some LLTs containing the information bruise or contusion were linked to injury PTs, so a PT representing the organ that was affected, the structure, anatomical structure that was affected, and the addition injury. But this, of course, then on PT level lost the hemorrhage information. For example, the LLT renal contusion was linked to PT renal injury in an earlier version of MedDRA. And because data retrieval and analysis is performed on PT level, such placements could lead to missing relevant cases when looking for bleeding events. Please note that for this type of request, MSSO will need more time to come to a final conclusion. And I would really encourage you to submit change requests and to contribute to the maintenance of MedDRA. It takes time and effort, but this effort will keep the terminology up to date and make it most useful for the MedDRA community. Now, which of the following terms could be considered for addition to MedDRA? Again, think about the scope of MedDRA. When looking at these terms, which of the following terms could be submitted as a change request for addition to MedDRA. Drug-induced weight gain, mild diarrhea, AF, precancerous oral lesions, glucose above 100 milligram per deciliter. Most of you are going for the precancerous oral lesion, and that's completely right. Drug-induced weight gain, we don't have a lot of drug-induced, only a few drug-induced LLTs in the terminology, or when it's really related to a defined concept like drug-induced liver injury for a DILI, for instance. Mild is just a severity indicator. AF could relate to atrial fibrillation, but also to other concepts of cardiac arrhythmia, and of course numerical values are not part of MedDRA. You won't find it. Precancerous oral lesion would be an option for a change request. So always think about the scope of MedDRA, what is in the scope of MedDRA and what is not in the scope of MedDRA. Drug-related or drug-induced is captured by separate database fields, so doesn't need to be coded with MedDRA, unless it's a defined medical concept. Are there questions, Leander?
No, currently no questions. Thanks, Caroline.
Okay, so let's continue then. So in the context of MedDRA content and versioning, I would also like to address related MedDRA tools like the MedDRA browsers and the MVAT tool. They are free to use by all MedDRA subscribers, and I will introduce and demonstrate some of their functionalities in the next few slides. The MedDRA browsers are used to browse the terminology in order to find suitable terms for coding or suitable standardized MedDRA queries for data retrieval purposes. Out of the 3 MedDRA browsers that are provided by the MSSO, one is intended to be installed on local computers. That's the MedDRA desktop browser. It makes you independent of internet access. You can download this MedDRA desktop browser from the MedDRA website and also the MedDRA release files in order to upload these release files so that you can use the desktop browser. 2 others are accessible via the internet. A mobile version here for smartphones and tablet computers, and a version for use with a laptop or a desktop computer, the so-called web-based browser or WBB. You can see 2 URLs on the slide, one for the new web-based browser and one for the legacy web-based browser. Both are currently available as we are still in the transition period, but towards the end of the year, the legacy web-based browser will be switched off. I will use the legacy browser in today's webinar, and some of you may already have looked into it. Today's session will not allow to give you a full introduction into the features and usage of the browser, but I will demonstrate the most relevant functionalities. If you would like to learn more, please refer to the recorded session where the look and feel of the legacy and the new web-based browser are demonstrated in much more detail on our YouTube channel. I will later show you where to find it. The new browser provides all functionalities of the legacy one, but the user interface looks different. All 3 browsers require the entry of the MedDRA ID and of your organization, ID of your organization and a password. They support viewing MedDRA and the SMQs and related searches in all MedDRA languages. They also have language-specific interfaces, and the desktop browser and the web-based browser have the ability to export search results to a local file system. For coding purposes, The view of the primary and secondary link information and the advanced search options are very helpful to make your searches more focused and efficient. And some other features of the browsers mainly support data retrieval and analysis, like upload terms to run against SMQs, for instance. And if you are considering the submission of a change request to the MSSO and would like to see whether another MedDRA user has already submitted such a request, then the supplemental view of the browser is really useful. Please note that this functionality is not available in the desktop browser that you can upload on your own computer together with the MedDRA files, because this would mean that you would have to upload all the supplemental files on a regular basis. So that would be too complex. That's why the supplemental view is not available when using the desktop browser. I will demonstrate these features in a minute. Here is now a screenshot of the interface of our updated, the new web-based browser that was launched in December last year. It contains all functionalities of the legacy browser, I told you already, but has a simpler look, a more streamlined interface. The browser is mainly used for searching MedDRA in the MedDRA community, and that is why the focus of the interface is now on coding tasks, with much more space on the screen for such tasks. In the old browser version, search results were shown in a small panel in the center of the user interface. But as already mentioned, all functionalities of the legacy browser are still available in the updated version of the browser as well. The interface can be customized, meaning that you can accommodate your own preferences in the navigation bar on the top here. This way you don't have to adapt the settings with each new browser session. So if you set your settings, then it will be stored in the background, and if you reopen the tool, it will still be there. You will not have to adapt the settings again. So here you can see the search results of the medical term laryngosclerosis. Here it is, you see, we have looked for it. Here it is, you see the hierarchy, same PT, and if you do a right mouse click, you will see it in the hierarchy within the SOC listing. Here the same search, but displayed in the legacy browser, it becomes obvious that the user interface is more busy, with less space for search tasks. And last but not least, here a screenshot of the interface of the desktop browser. Similar to the legacy web-based browser, the user interface is quite busy, again showing the search results for the medical term laryngosclerosis. At some time point, an updated version of this browser will be made available by the MSSO as well, with the same objective to simplify the user interface in order to better support searching tasks. The release is planned for some time during 2025. It will be announced in advance so that all MedDRA users can make themselves familiar with the new look and feel of the updated tool. So now let me switch screens to give you a brief introduction to the basic functions of the legacy web-based browser for searching and coding purposes. So let me switch screens here. Here we are on the MedDRA website. Here is a link to the legacy web-based browser that I will use. I will be asked for my MedDRA ID and my password in order to log in. And here we are. So this is the legacy browser now. On the top, you'll find configuration options and links to useful information. So here is the preferred language for the interface. We have chosen English here, but you can choose any language that you can see here. We keep it with English. MedDRA concept descriptions sometimes also helpful. These are not definitions, not their medical definitions, but These are concept descriptions, how specific terms are classified, interpreted in MedDRA, like abuse, acute addiction. So useful to make yourself familiar with this. For instance, cancer carcinoma. Cancer can be one of several histologic types of any cancer, and not only of epithelial tissues and epithelial neoplasm. Malignant neoplasm is carcinoma, but in MedDRA, carcinoma and cancer are considered as synonyms. So some important descriptions that are available in this list that is in alphabetical order that may be helpful for you. Then the legends, of course, is important. If you see a blue square around a PT, then it's a multi-axial prime that you are looking at it in its primary sock. Green square, again a multi-axial term that you are looking at in its secondary sock. Red square, then it's a uni-axial primary term. Of course, it's primary because it only has one linkage. A blue square around a sock identifies the primary sock, and here are the non-current LLTs. This is how they are highlighted. Red square and red lettering of LLT. Then we have the direct link to the MedDRA documentation and a very detailed user guide. For analysis purposes, there's SMQ analysis, hierarchy analysis. So this is more for data retrieval, data analysis purposes. Here you can compare up to 3 languages. Here you see all the languages that are available in MedDRA. You can compare 3 of them. All the versions of MedDRA starting with 2.1 are available here, and you can either look for the SOC view or the SMQ view. So let's focus on the SOC view now, and let's think about a term like, for instance, insufficient kidney function. It was reported for a patient that there was an insufficient kidney function, and you would do a top-down search in this window here, in this panel, where you see all the system organ classes. If you click on the plus sign, you can open the system organ classes. You will then see the HLGTs. You can further go down here, down to the PT level, and then to the LLT level. So we had the insufficient kidney function. So we would, of course, look into renal and urinary disorders then and see what we have here. Renal disorders excluding nephropathies seems to be the best approximation to what we have. Here we have the renal failure complications, renal failure and impairment. So this is what has been reported for our patient. And if I click on this plus sign again, we see a long list here: acute kidney injury, chronic. So our impaired kidney function, insufficient kidney function was not further specified. So we would look into renal failure. We don't know whether it was a neonate who was affected. So here we have insufficient kidney function. Insufficiency renal would be the best approximation based on the word order. Insufficiency renal. So this is the top-down search that you can do, perform in this window. You could also do a bottom-up search. So in order to do a bottom-up search, we would enter the reported term into this search window in the center of the screen. So if I would enter the strings kidney here and insufficiency, just a word stem to cover both insufficiency and insufficient, and say search, I would of course not have an exact match because I have a truncated word here. And here we have certain LLT proposals. One of them is non-current LLT. You see there's a typo in here. C is missing, so that's why it was made non-current. So what do we have? Insufficiency renal. Here is our term. And if I click, right mouse click and say go to browser, you would see it in the hierarchy like we saw it before when doing the top-down search. We would again be in HLT, renal failure and impairment. You could now look at the neighbor terms and see whether there is a more specific term even for the reported condition. Maybe you have some more demographic information, or you know whether it's acute or chronic. You also see in which SMQs this term is insufficiency renal is included, so quite a number of SMQs, of course. And what you can also see that some of the LLTs here do not relate to renal, but to adrenal. And this is when the advanced search, you may have a very long list and it would be very difficult to find a suitable term. And then the advanced search is really renal insufficiency, and I would say not contains adrenal, and I would search, and then I would get a streamlined search result here. All the adrenal terms are gone, and I really have the renal terms only. You also see that our kidney, let me go back, the kidney insufficiency, there is no kidney insufficiency. It was automatically replaced by renal. Kidney was replaced by renal, and this is because there's a synonym list behind in this tool that replaces certain words like kidney with renal, cardiac with heart, hepatic with liver, etc. So that's a very nice feature of, you should always activate all these features here in the browser. You may also limit your search to certain system organ classes, like for instance investigations, if you would only be interested in renal function, for instance. Renal function tests, NOS, you would only get terms that are grouped in system organ class investigations. So let me again go to the browser. Here we are. You see that there is a separate HLT for renal function analysis, and there you find all the relevant parameters to measure the renal function. So don't forget to clear the selection. And now I would like to just shortly show you the supplemental view. You see that this the screen changes in color in order to make you aware that you are not looking into the released version of MedDRA, but the next one that will be, so the current status of the next MedDRA version release. So all the new terms that will become available with the next MedDRA version, you can see in the supplemental view. So the status, the current status of this supplemental version. Let's assume that we have a report on an hormone receptor positive HER2, and hormone receptor here, hormone receptor positive, HER2 positive breast cancer. So you see that there's a green circle around it, dotted line. If I again say go to browser, you see here neoplasms primary SOC. It has its own PT, and you see that there's a hormone receptor positive breast cancer, hormone receptor positive HER2 negative breast cancer. So the hormone receptor positive HER2 positive breast cancer was missing. It was submitted by a MedDRA user, so it will become available with the next MedDRA version. So if you have such a report and consider a change request, it's helpful to really look into this supplemental view. You see that it's already available. You don't have to submit this change request again. So this was just a brief overview on how this looks like. Do we have questions related to the browser, Leander?
No questions, thanks, Caroline.
Oh, so then let's continue. Here we are. Another tool that the MSSO offers to all MedDRA license holders is the MedDRA version analysis tool, or MVAT. The MVAT is a web-based tool that you can access with your, again, user ID and password via this URL here. Now, let me shortly summarize its functionalities. The first feature listed on the slide is the generation of version reports, comparing any two versions of MedDRA. So when a clinical trial is run over 5 years, let's assume, and you have used the starting version throughout the clinical trial, you can compare this starting version with the newest MedDRA version in order to get an idea of what has changed in between in the MedDRA hierarchy, non-currencies, etc. This feature also provides the option to include secondary SOC information. The second feature of the tool is the identification of changes in a specific data set that you can upload into the tool that you have already coded. So up to 100,000 rows can be uploaded, meaning the LLTs and or PTs that were assigned to your verbatims. The tool will then show you the changes to those MedDRA terms between the version that was used to code the data and any MedDRA versions that you define. These may be changes in the hierarchy, or it should be that an LLT was made non-current, etc. Again, you can include secondary SOC information if important for your retrieval purposes, but please note that there is one gap that you should be aware of. MVAT has no autocoding feature and will not identify beta terms for your verbatims that became available with new MedDRA versions. So this would still have to be done manually. Please note that there are no confidentiality issues when loading your own data into the tool. The loaded data stay on your computer and are not stored after you close the MVAT session. And the third and last feature of MVAT helps identify changes to a single individual MedDRA term or code which may be relevant for the safety profile of a medicinal product, something that can also be retrieved by the term history function of the MedDRA browsers. And last but not least, the user interface and the report output of MVAT is available in all released MedDRA languages, and MVAT also offers the ability to run reports on supplemental changes and secondary SOC changes. MVAT is now embedded in the new web-based browser that was released in December last year, so you can also access it directly from the browser, from the new MedDRA web-based browser. An updated MedDRA desktop browser is planned for release sometime during 2025, this year, and it will also have MVAT embedded in it. This is how the user interface of MVAT tool in the new web-based browser looks like. Here you would make a comparison between version 27.1 and version 28.0 and run the report, which will provide you with a table that will show what kind of changes were implemented in the terminology between these two versions. And this is a screenshot of the user interface of the legacy MWAT. Again, less space for your searches. The new interface is much more user-friendly. Time today does not allow for a more detailed MWAT demonstration, but if you are interested in this tool, there's very useful detailed information about the MWAT features on the MedDRA website under the header Training, Training Material, and Tools. Any questions, Leander?
Yes, we've had one that's come in.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just read it. I thought to state my observations. The presentation slides used by the presenter had the rules for primary SOC, but the one attached for us don't. Let me look at the slides that are
Yeah,
there. I don't think
it
that's
may
something you.
be that I've added one or two because I thought it's important. All the slides that are in the handout are also in my presentation, but as I have the quiz questions, of course, I have added, and I have added one or two slides for better understanding of the MedDRA structure.
Yeah, that's great, Caroline. I think
Yep.
looking back, that is one of them that you've added just to help with
Yeah.
this presentation this morning. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So we will now cover some basics of coding with MedDRA. First, let me explain what is meant by the term coding conventions. Generally speaking, coding conventions are written guidelines for coding with MedDRA in your organization. It is crucial to have them not only for your operational coding tasks, but also for inspection readiness, because inspectors asked for them, and you should have them available in writing to show that all medical coders in your organization are doing their job based on defined conventions. They may address topics like excuse me, handling of misspellings, abbreviations, or acronyms. Another area you may want to cover are combination terms and due to combinations of medical concepts, how to handle those. There may also be terms that you would always like to query, like, for example, chest pain, to find out whether it is of cardiac origin or caused by other non-cardiac events, like, for example, pulmonary embolism. But you may also want to query reports of an unspecified infarction, necrosis, occlusion, etc., in order to find out the affected anatomical structure. You may now ask yourself why such detailed instructions are actually needed. Well, first of all, coders may have a very different background, and they may need guidance how to handle very specific medical terms within MedDRA, with a goal to achieve, of course, accurate and consistent coding output. Also, MedDRA is very large and nearly always provides a variety of coding options as compared to previous legacy terminologies. So coders need more guidance on how to prioritize and handle these options in order to achieve coding consistency, especially when they are working in different functions and geographical regions. And you may have the need for more specific coding rules also for certain medical areas based on your product portfolio. It is often assumed that autocoders that look for a match between a verbatim and an LLT would solve all these problems. But this is not the case. Even with a very sophisticated autocoding algorithm and lots of testing, autocoders will not cover all verbatims, first of all. So manual coding will still be needed. And also, autocoding results will always have to be QC'd by qualified individuals with good medical background and sound MedDRA knowledge to ensure autocoding accuracy. Ideally, all MedDRA users should use the same basic set of rules for their coding. Remember that when talking about MedDRA, we are talking about standardization. ICH took the initiative here and implemented the so-called M1 working group, or Points to Consider working group, with members from industry and regulators, as well as from the MSSO and JMO and the WHO as an observer. This group has compiled a points to consider document called MedDRA Term Selection Points to Consider document. And this M1 working group is, of course, also further maintaining this document. It's versioned. Here is a snapshot of the cover page of the current ICH Points to Consider document for MedDRA term selection for version 28.0. It provides guidance and many examples on how to perform accurate term selection using MedDRA. This guidance should be the basis for any in-house coding conventions and coding decisions within the different organizations of all MedDRA users, thereby promoting overall coding consistency and also facilitating common understanding when sharing clinical data. If you don't have an in-house coding conventions, you may also use this PTC document as coding convention within your organization. The document is updated with each major MedDRA version release. That means beginning of March each year. What is important to know is that the original and comprehensive versions of the PTC document are currently available in English, Japanese, Chinese, Korean, Spanish, and Russian. And in addition, there are condensed, shorter versions of these comprehensive documents in some of the other MedDRA languages, except of course of those where we have the full versions. So these are shorter versions that really focus on the general principles for coding and do not go into details on selected topics. They are not updated on a yearly basis, but on an as-needed basis, and these condensed versions are available in the languages that you can see down here: Arabic, Brazilian, Portuguese, Czech, Dutch, French, German, Hungarian, Italian, and Portuguese. Both the comprehensive and the condensed version of the Points to Consider document cover some general term selection principles. We will now look at some of these principal coding rules, but time today does not allow to address all of them in more detail. Coding is done on LLT level, the data entry level, as mentioned earlier. The LLT selected should capture as much information provided by the original verbatim as possible. As can be seen in this example, reported is an abscess on the face. Do not just code to abscess, because an abscess could affect many body sites like the brain or lung. But code as specifically as possible by assigning LLT facial abscess, because we want to capture as much information from the report as we can. And only current LLTs must be used in ongoing coding. As mentioned earlier, the non-current LLTs are still in the terminology for historical purposes to support interpretation of legacy data and legacy data conversion. When coding, make sure to capture and appropriately classify all reported events. Do not omit medically relevant information. We are not interested in causality because it is captured elsewhere, but we should capture all reports of device-related events, product quality issues, medication errors, medical and social history of patients, investigations, and indications as appropriate, depending on regulatory requirements and your coding conventions. For all coding tasks, the most important MedDRA coding principle applies. Code as reported, meaning that all reported information should be captured and appropriately classified without adding or subtracting information. MedDRA helps us to streamline the reported information, the reported verbatim, in a medically meaningful, standardized way. So the reported information: throbbing above temple, aching all over head, pulsing pain in head, really bad headache, or just headache, can be coded to headache, because this is what all these verbatims relate to. Infection in lungs can be coded to lung infection, or patient took drug A instead of drug B and experienced hypertension would need to be split coded, and LLT wrong drug administered, and the subsequent adverse event, the hypertension, would need to be captured. All of this can be done with MedDRA. I've mentioned already that the first part of the full PTC document focuses on the general principles for coding. The second part of the PTC document then addresses some specific coding topics, individual types of data, and how to handle them in operational coding. As you can see, the list of topics is quite comprehensive, with points like diagnosis and provisional diagnosis with or without signs and symptoms, death and other patient outcomes, combination terms, how to prioritize age versus event specificity or body site versus event specificity, exposures during pregnancies, medical surgical procedures, and the list continues on the next page here. Medication errors, accidental exposures, occupational exposures, device-related terms, drug interactions, social circumstances, off-label use, product quality issues. So if you are not familiar with the document yet, I can only highly recommend to read the document to make yourself familiar with the content, so that you know where to find guidance for these coding scenarios. And of course, you should be very much familiar with the content if you are responsible for your own in-house coding conventions, in order to make sure that your conventions do not contradict the rules and the guidance provided in this ICH Points to Consider document. This table provides a summary of the available ICH guidance documents. Here is the MedDRA term selection Points to Consider document. Here the long version, the full version, updated annually, and then here the shorter condensed version with all the languages updated as needed. And you see that the M1 working group also provides a Points to Consider document for data retrieval and presentation called MedDRA Data Retrieval and Presentation Points to Consider. And the same way as in the coding document, we have a full version and shorter versions, condensed versions. So here we are. And in addition, the responsible ICH working group also provides a so-called companion document that provides even more detailed information and more examples for coding topics that are of regulatory interest. It is available in English and Japanese and is a living document that is updated as needed. The document covers the topics coding of medication errors and other product use issues, and also data quality issues. It also includes a section on product quality issues for distributed products reported in the clinical setting, and a new section addressing deviations or non-conformances during the manufacturing process and quality system issues during this manufacturing process. And this was all added in version 3.0 of the document, and it was released in September last year. So this new version also includes some updates of the pre-existing sections. So let me shortly show you where to find these documents. You find them on the How to Use support documentation page. On the top, Points to Consider documents in MedDRA Best Practices document. Here you see the MedDRA term selection Points to Consider release 4.25, the MedDRA data retrieval and presentation, all of them available as in PDF, Word document, and HTML. And here is the Points to Consider companion document. This is where you can find it. Now, any questions? Because we will now start with the SMQs, the standardized MedDRA queries. Leander?
No, there's no more questions at the moment. Thanks, Caroline.
I hope it's all clear. So this is now our last topic for today, and these are the standardized MedDRA queries, or SMQs. Quite soon after MedDRA was more widely used, it became obvious that standard queries were needed for conditions that are relevant in the context of medicinal product use. Before the provision of the SMQs, different PTs were selected and used for providing retrieval results to regulators for the same medical condition, like, for example, hepatic damage. So something had to be done, and the concept of the standardized MedDRA queries was born. With the SMQs, industry and regulators can perform searches for a specific condition in the same way. In this way, allowing for a valid comparison of safety findings between different databases and for different products. Like any other query, the SMQs represent term groupings related to a medical condition or area of interest, in the majority of cases from more than one MedDRA SOC. They contain terms for clinical signs and symptoms, diagnosis, clinical syndromes, physical findings, lab values, other test data, etc., etc. And they intend to support case identification. But the SMQs are standardized ones that are pre-built for you. SMQs are constructed at MedDRA PT level, and the LLTs underneath these PTs are automatically included. Now, how does a query work? How would you run an SMQ? Let me illustrate this using this graph. If we start from the left-hand side, you see that we start out with a clinical trial database or safety database. These databases contain cases with events coded to MedDRA LLTs. So we could have a list of LLTs assigned to reported adverse events for each particular patient. Now let's look at the right-hand side. A query is built on PT level, and it may be a standardized MedDRA query or a query we have built. Ultimately, a query is a list of PTs we think represent the condition of interest. Because the cases in our database are coded to LLTs, the PTs of our query get broken down to LLTs. And when running a query, a matching process takes place, looking for a hit or match between the LLTs in our list and the list of LLTs used for coding the cases. And if a match between these LLTs is found, that case will be retrieved, and in this way, a list of potentially relevant cases will be created for further medical assessment, further medical review and assessment, in order to ensure that these cases are truly relevant based on medical considerations. I've shown you already that the ICH M1 expert working group also provides a PTC document that covers topics related to retrieval and presentation of MedDRA coded data. And here's a snapshot of the front cover of the latest version that was released beginning of March this year. It is called MedDRA Data Retrieval and Presentation Points to Consider, and it provides data retrieval and presentation options for industry or regulatory purposes, and should be used, of course, in conjunction with the PTC document for MedDRA term selection, because accurate and consistent MedDRA coding is a crucial prerequisite for a reliable and reproducible data output. And finally, internal approaches and processes for data retrieval and analysis should not be in conflict with what is outlined in this document here. With version 28.0, a total of 110 level 1 SMQs are in production, and here you have a few of them on the screen, and you can see that these are typical topics in drug development and pharmacovigilance that you would search for, typical drug-related adverse reactions. You will find medical conditions like hypersensitivity, hepatic disorders, convulsions, etc. But you will also find topics like lack of drug effect, for instance, or medication errors. So make yourself familiar with the topics that are covered by the SMQs to be able to use them for queries in your database, because this way you will not be surprised by a letter from a regulator pointing at a specific safety issue of your product, because regulators do use SMQs on a regular basis for safety signaling in their databases. The benefits of using an SMQ is that they can be applied across multiple therapeutic areas. They are not product or drug class specific. They are validated and rigorously tested before release, usually at least in one industry and one regulatory database. They are reusable and allow for standardized communication of safety information between pharmaceutical companies and regulators. They also allow for consistency in the way data retrievals are set up and run, so companies and regulators would look for a condition in the same way. The other big benefit is efficiency, because the SMQs are maintained and versioned centrally by the MSSO and JMO, thereby reducing the amount of work to be done on your part. However, there are also some limitations that you should be aware of. First of all, not all medical topics or safety issues are covered by the SMQs. So there will still be scenarios where you have to build your own query, and that is why it is important that you know how to do it. After release into production, SMQs further evolve and undergo further refinement, even though they have been extensively tested during their development. It is only when they are put into production and subscribers start using them that they provide feedback via the change request process based on their experience. They may have noticed that some terms may be missing in the SMQ and they think they should be included, or other PTs may produce too much noise, retrieving a lot of irrelevant cases, and users may therefore ask to make the respective PTs inactive in an SMQ. At first, SMQs were only used in the post-marketing area, but it was quickly realized that they are helpful for broader use as well. SMQs can be utilized in clinical trials for screening when the safety profile is not fully established, or a specific SMQ can be used for case identification to check whether there is a safety issue based on preclinical data or a known class effect, for instance. In post-marketing, selected SMQs can be used to retrieve cases for suspected or known safety issues. They can be applied for signal detection, even using all SMQs in large data sets. Also, single case alerts can be programmed that flag cases where the assigned code matches a PT of a specific SMQ as an early warning system. And SMQs can also be used for periodic reporting to aggregate cases for safety issues or other issues like lack of efficacy. Any questions?
No, Caroline, no questions, thank you. No questions.
Okay, now we come to the browser demonstration again, not using the SOC but the SMQ view, just shortly to show you. Where am I? Here I am. So let me go back to the released view. and switch to the SMQ view in the legacy browser. And now you see on the left side, you see a list of all 110 SMQs in alphabetical order. And it's similar to what we saw before with the system organ classes. If you click on the plus sign here, for instance, acute pancreatitis, the PT content will appear. You see some PTs that are uh, shown in blue color PT or in red color. So this means the blue colored ones are the so-called narrow scope PTs. They are specific for the condition of interest, acute pancreatitis, whereas the red ones are the broad scope PTs. They provide sensitivity of your search. So depending on what you are looking for, what type of data retrieval you would like to run, you would either use the narrow scope terms only to have a very specific retrieval, or you would use the narrow and the broad ones if you would like to have a more sensitive search. And you see here all the blue ones are very specific, considering pancreatitis, different types of pancreatitis, whereas the red ones are like nausea, for instance, acute abdomen. They are not really specific for acute pancreatitis only. So this is how you could explore the SMQs here. When you click on an SMQ name, you can see a short description you can see that this was the 22nd SMQ that was developed. As an SMQ, you see a short description, the sources that were used in order to come up with this description, and also an SMQ note how to use the SMQ. So acute pancreatitis is an algorithmic SMQ, and the SMQ note provides the guidance how to implement the search in your systems, how to use it. We could also, in the search field, look for an SMQ name. So let's look for arrhythmia, for instance. And you see a lot of SMQs that come up here: ventricular tachyarrhythmias, cardiac arrhythmias. Here it is. And if I click, right mouse click, go to browser, it brings me to this SMQ, cardiac arrhythmia. And when I open it, you see that this is a so-called hierarchical SMQ. So arrhythmia-related investigation signs and symptoms are underneath, cardiac arrhythmia terms sorted again, next level, bradyarrhythmias, cardiac arrhythmia terms, non-specific, tachyarrhythmias, and congenital neonatal arrhythmias. So this is how you can explore the SMQs, just shortly. You can also export. That's something that may be useful for you. Right mouse click, for instance, on acute pancreatitis, and you can choose SMQ export. Let us include the inactive ones and say export. Here we have them. It's an Excel sheet. Here it is. You have inactive is included. You see the version 28.0, the name of the SMQ, acute pancreatitis. You see the scope, narrow scope, broad scope. You see the one that is inactive. Here you see when it was added, when it was last modified, and this way you can give it to your programmer in order to run the SMQ in your database. So that's a very nice feature of the browser. Let me switch back. So, next question for you. PTs that are included in a query may relate to lab test results, diagnosis, toxicologic issues, clinical syndromes, clinical symptoms, histopathology findings, physical findings, medical surgical procedures, medical, social, and family history, clinical signs, specific types of death and sudden death, diagnostic and imaging procedure findings. So if you would look for a certain condition, what would you look for? Exactly, all of them are relevant. Specific types of death and sudden death, so sudden cardiac death, you would of course include in a query for cardiac arrhythmias, for instance. So all of them are relevant. So you really have a very broad approach when compiling a query. And this is also, of course, true for the SMQs. Well done, thank you. So this is what we have discussed today. Just a short summary. And this is now your last chance for questions.
So there's no current questions at the moment, but my eyes are on the question panel in case one pops in, Caroline, but it doesn't seem at the moment that there's any questions.
So I hope that everything was clear what I've demonstrated today. What Liana will do is to provide you with a temporary password for the MedDRA browser. So if you would like to explore the MedDRA browsers, use them, you can do so. It's a temporary password if you don't have your own password already, and it's only valid until end of the week, but it provides you the option, gives you the option to use the browsers. So here are some additional contexts and sources of information that may be helpful for you. If you would like to have more information of MedDRA topics, it is always worthwhile to visit the MedDRA website. In addition, you can always contact the MSSO help desk with your questions, and you can be sure to get a quick and useful response from the colleagues there. Also, you find an FAQ section on the website where you may find useful answers to your questions as well. And here again, the links to the MSSO MedDRA browsers, to the change request tool, and to the training schedule and the MedDRA support documentation. Let me show you the training schedule here. Here we are. Here is the face-to-face trainings that we offer. You see in Denmark in September, in Peru, in Latin America, United States, and here are the webinars. So this is the one that we have today. Here is the MedDRA coding basics. It will be provided in French. End of June, data analysis and query building with MedDRA in Chinese. Let's code together in Korean, and MedDRA coding of medication errors, general principles. I will provide end of June here, and it will also provided by our Korean colleague Yuni in July. So this is the place to go in order to check what type of webinars are available, at which time, in which languages, and of course this is continuously updated. So the next ones for August, September, October, and so forth will be posted soon. Here we are. What I would also like to mention is that we have launched a so-called Learning Management System, LMS, beginning of this year. This is the latest addition to our training offerings. So this LMS system provides a controlled environment for self-learning videos and guides users through a predefined learning path. And there's a beginner and more advanced level you can choose from, and also you can choose from a certificate, so you can get a certificate there, or non-certificate tracks if you just would like to revisit some of the information that you have learned in a webinar, for instance, and you are not interested in a certificate. There is an unlimited number of accounts per organization, important to know. And here some examples of the topics that are covered by this LMS training: overview of MedDRA coding and analysis, outcomes, suicide, social circumstances, pregnancy topics, interactive MedDRA coding as well. So here you can log on with either this QR code or by using this web address here. You can not only contact the MSSO via our help desk, but also via other communication channels, as you can see when clicking on the button Contact on the upper right side of the MedDRA website. So you'll find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, X, and on YouTube. And you can also join English, Spanish, French, Russian, Indian, and Chinese WhatsApp and WeChat groups. And we also offer an online contact form from where you can directly type in your questions and submit them. So the YouTube channel may be of special interest for you because there you'll find recorded sessions of our training events sorted by trainers. So let me show you where to find it. So contact, here we are, and here is this little icon, YouTube channel, and here are the different trainers that we have, different languages, and for instance in Chinese, in Russian, Spanish. Here are the Let's Code Together sessions, so workshop format for more advanced coders. So depending on your area of interest, your language, just you have a broad option to visit these recorded sessions. So here lots to look at. So you can also revisit some topics that you are not too familiar with yet. So it's always helpful to look into this YouTube channel in order to refresh or to get more familiar with certain topics. So here we are. And with this, I hope that you found this webinar useful and hope to meet you again in one of our trainings that we offer on a regular basis. Thank you for your interest in today's topic and for registering for this event. And a big thank you also to you, Leander, for your support today. So enjoy the rest of the day. Goodbye for now. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Bye-bye.